Welcome. Our first question is just to tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you are now.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for turning up to hear from us all today. So my name's Charlotte, and I work for a charity called Smartworks. I'm in the office, so you can see some of the images behind of what we do. But what we do is we help women who are unemployed by helping them with the sort of interview training and coaching, and also the interview clothing, so that they feel really confident and prepared to succeed at a job interview and then secure employment. So we work with lots of different charities to be able to help women who might need us. So that's the charity that I work for, and I am head of grants and community fundraising. So in our fundraising and partnerships team. And I will have been at Smartworks for 5 years in September, and I actually started on our graduate scheme. So after a year out after studying philosophy at Selwyn, I started on the graduate scheme, did a little bit of everything, as any true graduate does, and absolutely loved it, and then managed to find myself a place to stay at Smartworks. And I will be here for the foreseeable future, I think, because I absolutely love the charity and what we do. Hopefully that's a flavour of who I am and what I do, and I've not missed anything there.
Hi guys, my name is Craig. I am the head of projects for a social impact consultancy called Koreo, and we're probably best known for our work as managing agent on the Charityworks programme. Charityworks is a UK non-profit sector graduate scheme aimed at providing graduate opportunities and professional development training for people who are leaving university and want to kind of kickstart a career within a social change. I am the development director for that program in particular, so I look after all of our charity partners, building new relationships to get people to support the program, and also the team that holds our recruitment process as well. So reaching out and working with university partners. I kind of fell into the sector completely by accident. So actually my career started in retail banking, of all places. And through a kind of bit of a turbulent period in my life, I decided that I wanted to go and study for a degree in chemistry. And actually that led to me kind of recognizing that I had a certain skill set which was kind of in demand, or felt in demand, but also I was aligning my career aspirations with wanting to create social impact. Actually, I had a real kind of bee in my bonnet about particularly social mobility and some of the challenges that people face accessing employment opportunities. So I started interning for an organization that supported that, working on a program that supported people with long-term health conditions, and ended up doing what I'm doing now. So it was completely by accident is my entry into the sector. Yeah, that's me. Thanks, Becca.
Great, thank you. And Katie?
Thanks, Becca. Hi everyone, I am Katie. I work for an organisation called Lively Minds. We're based, work in the UK, Ghana and in Uganda, and we are working with the governments in Ghana and Uganda to help improve their like early years kind of offering. So we're training teachers, train mothers to run play schemes, play groups, and improve early childhood development in sort of very rural areas. So within international development, international education is my kind of area of expertise, I guess. And I am head of monitoring and evaluation, which means a lot of looking at program data, assessing program quality, managing external research projects related to the program. In terms of how I got here, probably quite different to Craig, actually. It's a bit of a cliche. On my gap year, went to Kenya for 6 months to volunteer at a school and thought, yep, this is the direction that I want to go in. So that was quite, at an early stage. Went back through my degree. I did a politics degree, so tried to make that kind of quite targeted to things that were relevant to what I wanted to do. Had some summer jobs working for smaller charities, which I think was really helpful to kind of get an insight without being too into kind of too specific a role. Finished my degree. I had a year working 2 part-time jobs, one of which included a graduate scheme at a small international development charity. I went back to university to do a Masters of Research in International Development, which, as you can imagine, is pretty specific to what I've ended up doing. And then I joined CampEd, which is based in Cambridge, and I was there for 5 years in their impact and then monitoring of an evaluation team. Yeah, kind of like working my way up, doing different roles within the team. And then I joined Lively Minds in October 2021, so about a year and a half ago.
Thanks, Katie. That's great. And Claire.
Thanks, Becca. So I'm Claire. I'm Head of Policy Research and Campaigns at End Furniture Poverty. And we're the campaigning arm of a group of charities known as FRC Group. And everything the group does is connected to furniture in some way. But about 2015, we realised there was only so much we could do directly ourselves, and we really needed to make sure everybody knew about furniture poverty, what it is, how it affects people, and do what we can to drive national change, to get others on board to do something about it. So I started off as I was a journalist for a number of years because I wanted to do something that I felt was meaningful and worthwhile. After that, I moved across into PR for a few years, which I didn't feel was particularly meaningful or worthwhile, although it had some benefits. But then an opportunity came up with a client of ours, which was FRC Group, to become their comms manager. So I moved over to do that. And then I took over the End Furniture Poverty campaign about 4 years ago. So I've been working for the charity for 8 years and doing End Furniture Poverty for about 4 years. And we publish research reports, do a lot of partnership working with other charities such as Children's Society Turn to Us, Joseph Rowntree, Trussell, and really do what we can to get furniture poverty in the media and to, as I say, work with a lot of things like social landlords to encourage them to provide furniture, lobbying MPs to encourage them to adequately fund local crisis schemes. And yeah, another big year ahead for us.
Thanks, Claire. And finally, Matt.
Oh yeah, thanks, Becca, for putting me last there. I work for a charity called It Takes a City. We're a fairly new charity. We're a homelessness partnership based in Cambridge. We've grown and changed direction during the pandemic. We started out, and part of my role is to signpost and to provide information, so a bit of a think tank role. But we've also, through the pandemic, we've started to provide services now. So at the moment, we've got our Crossways, which is our winter shelter open. That's open from November to April. So we've got 20 people and their dogs, if they need them, in there. So, and we take in some of the most embedded and entrenched street homeless people. So you can imagine with all the attendant problems that come with that. But my job essentially is to engage with the community. So we're doing an increasing amount of work with university students, with business, with the faith community. So it's bringing those together to find sort of novel solutions to what can sometimes be intractable problems. How I got here, it's a narrative arc that's 42 years really. When I was 15, I had to leave home. I had no choice. Domestic violence meant I had to get out very quickly. I then spent the next decade homeless. I was very rarely on the streets. I was in London during the 1980s, so we squatted an awful lot. I sofa surfed until such time as I outlived my welcome. And I survived for 10 years doing that. So the last 30 years really have been, most of my jobs have been involved in housing justice. So my own personal belief is that a home should be a right, not something you earn. So I've worked for housing associations, I've worked for local authorities, normally in the area of tenants' rights and helping people that are vulnerably housed. So really this for me, the last 2.5 years has been a dream job. It's almost like coming home to work for a homeless charity where I feel that my lived experience, even though it was 40 years ago, some of the issues around homelessness haven't changed in those 40 years. So it's an opportunity for me to give back to a community that is often forgotten about and often marginalised.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you everyone for, and I think, you know, a really nice mix of different routes and paths that people have taken that maybe kind of represents different ways that people do get into this sector. That's coming from all sorts of different places. But I wanted to ask our panelists, what are the kind of the big issues that are on your mind at the moment? I sometimes, when I'm talking to students, I say that, you know, the things that are keeping you up at night, that are worrying you, or the things that you're really excited about that get you up in the morning and get you wanting to go to work. So whether that's an issue that's been going on for a long time, or perhaps something that's rising more recently, it'd be really nice to hear those.
Oh, deep question. What's not on my mind at the moment is maybe an easier one. I think the first thing that came to mind is what I'll go over, and I think Matt, you touched on it really nicely there about sort of lived experience. I think that's so important, and I think is a theme across the charity sector at the moment. And I hope people are thinking more about how we include people with lived experience of the sort of topic that they're dealing with in sort of more of the strategy and decision making. So at SmartWorks, that would be including the women that we're helping with the service, so women who are unemployed and have benefited from the SmartWorks service, and including them more in the sort of decisions that we're making. So one of the things I do that's not related to grants or community fundraising, but I absolutely love, is our client advisory group. So it's women who've been through the service, have that lived experience, and we meet with them every quarter before our trustee meetings, so the people who make sort of big decisions about the charity and are in charge of our sort of governance and whatnot. And we take sort of key projects that we're working on to the client advisory group, and they're a group of amazing sort of 10 to 12 women who give their honest feedback and opinions of what we're working on. And I think it's absolutely amazing and so important that we're doing that work. And I'm thinking a lot at the moment about what else we can do in that area. I think it's a really good starting point. We've been doing it for the sort of last year or so, but I think there's a lot more that we can and should be doing. So that's very much on my mind. We are doing a sort of review of our EDI strategy at the moment, so equity, diversity and inclusion. And I think the client advisory group is one piece of that puzzle. But there's a lot more, again, that we could be doing to diversify the people who work at SmartWorks, our volunteer community as well. And we've got about 450 volunteers who work across the UK. And we really want our community of people to be more reflective of the women who are experiencing our service and sort of narrowing that gap. So that's something that I feel very passionately about. And that's the sort of thing that I lie in bed at night thinking about and want to do more on and do better in that area. Craig, I think you're next.
I think I am. Thanks, Charlotte. And actually, similarly building, so there's a couple of things I'm thinking about at the moment. Similarly to Charlotte, there's a big piece on diversity and inclusion. Charityworks as a program has a real diversity problem going back maybe like 4 years. Not just really white, but actually really middle class as well. And there was a bit of a sense of restlessness around that within the program team. And as a development direction, we doubled down really hard on ethnic diversity, and that was wonderful in that we saw the program jump from about 7% persons of color to almost 40% actually on the Charityworks program, which was an incredible leap over 4 years. And then it got us thinking about like what are the inherent barriers to access, and that led us to think a lot more about social class, background. It led us to essentially completely remove any qualification requirements from the program. So we still come to universities and talk about it as a graduate scheme, but actually we are wanting to work ever more closely with our partners to get people that are the beneficiaries of the charities into that space, because for such a long time actually the non-profit sector was really good at getting trustees on the board, but actually like paying people to come and work at an organization was a real kind of barrier, and still is, depending on background. So that's a big thing we're restless about, still doing a lot on socioeconomic diversity on the program, still trying to diversify the sector. And then the other thing that keeps me up at night a little bit is cost of living, actually, and what that means for our participants, because there is this real tension between us trying to be an inclusive program and work with organizations who are like really small to, you know, yeah, there's Christian Aid, NSPCC, etc., but there's also like tiny community-based charities with like a head count of 3. They all need access to amazing talent. Like everybody wants to do that, and arguably some of the smaller organizations are creating more immediate impact within their communities. But there's a real tension between a sector that is being asked to do so much more with so little, often at times, and also people entering the sector expecting a standard of pay that matches some of the challenges they're facing at cost of living. So that's also a little bit of a challenge for us at the moment. But yeah, I think that's probably my two, like my what's working and what's also worrying. I think I've got Katie next. Katie.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Yeah, totally echo what you're saying about cost of living. And I would say, from my perspective, that's us in the UK, but also my colleagues in Ghana and Uganda facing the same kind of issues makes it really tricky. I think for me, working in the education sector, international education, if you like, the impact of the COVID pandemic, I feel like it's maybe a bit unoriginal to say that, but I think it is feeling like it's behind us. But actually, if you're working in a school system where, I work in Uganda where there were 2 full years of the schools were closed for, they didn't reopen at all. And I think it's just waiting to see the impact of that and what that impact is going to be, and then how we deal with it, I think is going to take a long time. And for me, as kind of a stats and evidence person as well, sort of wanting people not to, the people that we work with as an organisation, thinking of donors and funders, not to kind of forget about that and forget how long the impact of that will take to come out and how long it will last for as well. Yeah, I think that's me really for that one. Was it Claire after me?
Thanks, Katie. Yes, without wanting to be repetitive, definitely cost of living for us. Obviously, we're an anti-poverty charity, and the pressures on so many families are just horrific now. And I think, understandably, there is so much focus on food and fuel, which obviously necessary to life, that some of the other very urgent needs can get squeezed out. And I think that a lot of the crisis support that's out there, again, focuses on food and fuel. So support for things like furniture, and appliances and flooring and window coverings, which is obviously what our priority is, are becoming much, much harder to access. And I think as local authorities are facing further huge budget cuts as they're setting their budgets for the next financial year, it's the pressure on the third sector to provide that support is really, really challenging. I think, as Craig says, charities are really struggling as well, and they cannot shoulder that entire burden on their own. A Citizens Advice have called 2023 the year of debt. And I think that as awful as things are now, it's going to get a lot worse because so many families have taken on debt just to manage their day-to-day living costs, and their household finances will break in the months ahead. So many, many more people will be struggling. And as we always say, if you can't afford food and you're using food banks, how on earth can you afford to replace a broken cooker? So I think, the other thing that keeps me awake at night, specifically for end furniture poverty, is our new report, which we're publishing in the next month, on the extent of furniture poverty. And that will show that there are millions of people in the UK who haven't got essential furniture items like cookers, like beds for their children, like fridges. And yeah, as bad as those figures are, when we repeat it again in the summer, they will be much higher. So that definitely keeps me awake at night. On to you, Matt.
Thanks, Claire. Start with a negative and then with a questionable positive. The negatives, again, I'm going to pick up on cost of living. Last year, obviously working with our partners like Jimmy's and Cyrenians, we were fairly confident if somebody was coming into us from the streets, and we deal with single people on the whole, they would come in, we could work with them in our shelter. They could stay with us for a couple of weeks, and there was normally a move on option for them. So there would be some kind of accommodation that was suitable to their needs. This year, we're finding that's not necessarily the case, because Cambridge is now, those options are shrinking as more and more people are being evicted or leaving their tenancies simply because they cannot afford to keep a roof over their head. So that's keeping the whole charity away. On a positive, but also it raises a big question mark, especially during the pandemic. It showed that Cambridge as a city, there's a lot of love, a lot of kindness, and a lot of mutual aid going on. So that's a positive. And we often get people contacting us saying, I want to volunteer, how can I help? That's the conundrum for us, because obviously working with people that have mental health issues or drug and alcohol issues, or a combination of those things, can sometimes put people off. But we also have the issue where we always say, if we get a group of accountants phone us and say to us, we've got 20 accountants who want to come and paint your fence, we say to them, well, actually, those 20 accountants could give a day's free accountancy advice to 20 charities and make a much bigger impact. So often it's working with those corporate social responsibility staff to say, actually, look, let's target your skills. I know you might want a day off of accountancy, but you know what? You can help 20 charities rather than one, because we can paint the fence. In fact, our guests can paint the fence. So it's a positive, people wanting to give, but often their expectations are not necessarily met by the opportunities we have to give them.
Thanks, and thanks all, and a lot of crossover, of course. I could see lots of people nodding away as you were talking there, Matt. And I was just going to pick up on something Craig was saying about Charityworks sort of dropping that graduate requirement for their not quite graduate scheme, and that's something we've got a question in the chat about graduate schemes. There are some other charities doing that, so things like Accelerate from Oxfam, there is no requirement to have a degree. It's an entry-level program for anyone, whether or not they've got a degree. So you might see more of those around as well. I've got the top voted question at the moment is about your best piece of advice, but I'm going to hold that one till the end because I think it's a really nice one to end on. So thank you for the person who asked that and everyone who's voted for it. We will come to it. Heads up for our speakers that I will do that as we come to the end of the panel. We've got some questions that I'm going to kind of put together. So one about different graduate schemes that are available. So I don't know if perhaps Craig and Charlotte and could talk a bit more in detail about those, but also some questions, and we had similar questions come in before the event about getting some work experience. Internship is the word that's been used here, although I suspect as we go down, we might end up hearing about things that aren't internships as well, that might be interesting work experience.
I don't mind talking to graduate schemes and that.
Thanks.
I'm the development director of one, so I should probably talk about it. So there are plenty of graduate schemes related to this space, or this sector. So ours, Charityworks, is the broad kind of non-profit one, the one that probably covers the sector as like a broad entity. And it's been running since 2009. And we support about 150 people into 150 real jobs within the sector. So the way it works is employers, charities will come to us and work with us to help fill real vacancies, and then we will match candidates through our process into real roles, whilst also running a 12-month leadership development program, which helps to accelerate their potential for career development and leadership roles in the future, specific to the non-profit sector. It's been hugely successful. It started as like 3 graduate trainees. We've now got an alumni community of over 1,000 people working in all sorts of different organizations, from like RNLI and Christian Aid to the LGBT Foundation, lots of registered social landlords and social housing. And there's a beautiful network of people who all have jobs within that sector at various stages in their career, who've gained a lot of professional development support. And then on top of that, have built wonderful networks, because one of the most interesting things is these big social issues, right, that we are all trying to tackle in our own different ways with our own different organizations. They're all wickedly complex social issues that require all sorts of levers to be pulled to make a real dent in it, whether it's, you know, local or national government level, or individual charities, or, you know, corporate social responsibility, I think Matt had referred to from private organizations. There are all sorts of mechanisms in creating social change. What I would say for anybody particularly interested in the non-profit sector, there's some good articles about all sorts of different graduate programs. Certain charities, large charities, run their own. So Cancer Research UK has its own. We ran UNICEF's for a number of years. They might actually run their own now. And then there's also kind of big programs that are related to different aspects of the sector. I'm not sure if Frontline's still running. There's also a whole bunch of programs around particular career areas, like Unlocked for graduate scheme in the prison sector, etc. So yeah, there are options, but also a reminder, and like graduate schemes are great. They're wonderful opportunities, but they're definitely not the only route into the non-profit sector.
Can I jump in? Thank you. As a former graduate, again, I feel like I should do. I obviously started on a graduate scheme, and I think looking back, the reason why I was doing that was because I wanted I knew I wanted to work for a charity, and I'd been chair of RAG at Cambridge, so the Raising and Giving Society, so that was kind of my entry into it. So I knew I wanted to work for a charity, and I wasn't quite sure where to go from there, and exactly which area I was interested in. I just knew I wanted to do some good, and I liked speaking with people in the charity sector, and that seemed interesting to me. And I thought a graduate scheme that will give me a well-rounded sort of opportunity to learn about lots of different areas, which it absolutely did do. But I think there are so many other ways to get that as well. So we have carried on running the graduate scheme since. We haven't launched anything for this year at SmartWorks. We might do, we might not do. It's still sort of up in the air at the moment, but keep an eye on that if you are interested. But actually there are so many good entry-level ways into the charity sector where you are still going to get that well-rounded opportunity and learn lots of different things. So we've hired lots of different graduates at SmartWorks, not through the graduate scheme, but into sort of more specific roles. But when you are the sort of size of charity that we are at the moment, even if you are doing one certain role, you are probably not going to be doing that only day in, day out. You are probably going to be roped into lots of other things, which is the best thing. So yeah, as Craig was saying, there's lots of different graduate schemes out there. But I think I was quite hung up at the time about finding a graduate scheme. But I wouldn't let that sort of limit you. And I think look at other opportunities out there and other entry-level roles, because a graduate scheme isn't all it's meant to be, and there are lots of other ways to sort of enter the sector and find your feet through another route.
Thanks, Charlotte. And yeah, on that point, has anyone got any thoughts maybe when you're recruiting, if that is part of your role, or just people you work with? What sort of work experience have they got that's been helpful?
I think for me, and I've recruited recently for 2 roles, it's showing a genuine interest and passion for the area that we work in, which for us is a poverty charity. But I think someone who's generally shown some, whether it's volunteering or previous roles, or just, you know, what they might be able to bring up in the interview, that shows a genuine interest in the third sector and the work that we do and the people that we're trying to help. So yeah, I think that's, to be honest, that's been the key thing. I mean, obviously furniture poverty is so niche that I wouldn't expect anyone to come to us having worked particularly in that. I mean, great if they did, but it's never happened. So yeah, just someone who's shown a bit of gumption and a bit of interest and curiosity.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think so for context, when I was at CamFed, I led the kind of the intern development and recruitment aspect of the M&E team, and what I would find quite often is that you would have applications from people who are very good, but they would say, oh, I'm very interested, and this was girls' education, but they hadn't really looked at what the role itself was. So it would be an internship, which would be quite broad, but they wouldn't seem to have kind of researched or read up about what the team that they were applying to be in did. I had someone describe it as I'd like to do an admin job in a charity, and we were like, no, sorry, that's yeah, this is not the role for you. So yeah, I think being interested but being really specific about if it is, as Charlotte said, an entry level but not a graduate scheme role that you're going for. And I think the other thing, so for me in my role, what I'm always looking for is a good grasp of being able to use Excel, actually. It's not sexy, but it's true. And that's some recruitment that I've been doing recently. We shortlist CVs and application forms, but the first practical test is an Excel test. Yeah, and I think that's something that's very easy to, if it is relevant for your job, I think it's relevant for a lot of them to kind of just brush up and learn actually in your own time, and it will just get you past that first hurdle, at least if you're going for a job which has got anything to do with data management research.
Thanks, Katie. And actually, we've had a couple of questions. It fits on quite nicely from the what are the things that are keeping you up at night, is you know, are there any skills or attributes or specialties that it would be useful for people to have in particular in your area? So Excel often comes up, doesn't it? Anything else from anyone?
I think something I'm seeing more and more is evidence for project management. That's becoming a bigger requirement in Lively Minds at the moment, and I'm seeing it more coming up in like other job descriptions as well. I think particularly if you're applying to like a smaller charity, then just showing a willingness to be able to get in and get stuck in with anything, and not being too, I want to work on this thing and it's what I'm really passionate about and that's the only thing I'm going to do. Yeah, I think.
Just picking up on that, Katie, absolutely. We're a very small charity, and my job title doesn't match my daily work. So, you know, we're a very small team. Something comes in, not necessarily a crisis, but something comes in which we have to deal with. And often that is amongst our little team going, who's got some skills in that? And I would say, as somebody who, when I get sent an Excel spreadsheet, my heart sinks. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean by having, and increasingly people send them to me. So that is actually a really useful skill if you've got it and you're not frightened or put off by a spreadsheet. That's a skill to have, Katie. Absolutely agree.
I think there's a couple of things actually that Katie said. One, I want to challenge. Excel is very sexy, so just putting that out there. Definitely get that skill. Sorry, Matt. And probably the second is one of the things that often happens to us. It was really interesting to hear Katie talk about is you get people coming with a real enthusiasm over like a particular cause area that they want to work in, and actually as a result don't actually relate to the specifics of the role, like in the day job. And I couldn't agree more with Matt. Like, it doesn't matter how senior you get within this sector, you will still spend so much of your time mucking in on all sorts and getting really stuck in to workload. So I think it probably builds on what Claire was saying, is that there's something about a real passion, like developing and articulating your passion and care for the work, which is really important. But then in terms of your practical skills, I think a lot of the time is drawing on like core competencies that you develop through any experience. And this is one of the things from a diversity and inclusion perspective that we need to be super aware of, is that not everyone can, you know, take extended periods of time out to do extensive volunteering, for example, but they may have some amazing relationship management experience from, you know, a part-time job that they've done, or they may have shown a commitment to social change through caring responsibilities for a family member. It's drawing on the stuff that you're doing already, probably at university, and articulating those skills. Like, the sector will need people who can build relationships, are super resilient, especially in terms of like budgets getting cut, like being able to be adaptable to changing circumstances. Like, these are all things that I'm sure, you know, you're encouraged to promote and think about through the career service, but it's super important to the sector as in any other, I think.
Thanks, everyone. And we've got a question in the chat, and in fact we had some questions coming in beforehand about we've talked about some of the challenges, but what are the most enjoyable or the most rewarding bits of your job? And I'm going to couple that in with a couple of questions about what kind of things do you do. So hopefully as you talk about the most rewarding things, you'll also be able to give us a bit of an insight into the everyday as well.
What's rewarding? There's so many things that are rewarding. So, for example, in Crossways, our shelter that we have at the moment, I mean, every time you pop in there, to see the way we work, we've created a home. It's our shelter is different in the sense that previous models, you'd come in, you'd stay overnight, and a bit like a bed and breakfast, the landlady would kick you out in the morning. That's not how we work. So we've got some guests that have been in with us now since we opened in November, and we're working very, very closely with them, you know, to deal with any issues they might have. Seeing some of our guests, well, as today there's 3 dogs in, so seeing the difference, being a dog owner myself, seeing the difference that having a pet in a homeless shelter can make, how that changes the atmosphere completely. And also seeing somebody come in very distressed, perhaps with just literally the clothes they're standing up in, and seeing how kindness and compassion, but also making clear that there are certain boundaries and how you can help those people, and seeing those people a year later who aren't on the streets and they see you in a different circumstance. You can sometimes be surprised to see them in that situation, and you see them and you think that's all worth it. Every single person that you help not to sleep in a shop doorway is your job done, and that's all the satisfaction that myself and my team need.
I'm happy to jump in, but I don't think I can beat Matt's lovely answer there. I completely agree. I think being in the sort of partnerships fundraising team, I do spend a lot of my time in a spreadsheet or talking to a corporate of accountants who want to do things for SmartWorks and channeling them in the right way. And it's actually seeing then the impact of all of that. I feel very lucky that as a sort of service delivery charity, I'm based in the office now, and the sofa where our clients come in and sit is right across from me. And I might pop out to get my lunch from writing a grant all day that sometimes I enjoy, but sometimes it's a bit tedious, I'm not going to lie. And I walk past a client who's lost and she's trying to find SmartWorks, and I take her in and make her a cup of tea, and then I see her a month later when she's got the job. And that is quite unique. I think a lot of charities, you might not always be based where the service is being delivered. And I'm sure that's sort of equally as rewarding, that you find the sort of, you see the impact in other ways. But I feel very privileged to be in the space where the service is being delivered, sort of quite similar to Matt. And I find that sort of day in, day out very rewarding. That's not what I'm doing on a day-to-day. I'm aware that that's, you know, grants and community fundraising is quite different from that, but those elements of impact and why you're doing what you do feed into those different things. So I think it's important that I can see that and hear that from the women that we're helping, and bring that to life in a grant application and tell their story to funders. And for me, it's always about bringing it back to the clients that we're helping, and that's where I sort of find the most rewarding aspects of my job.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. And I do sometimes talk to students about that kind of front office, back office role when you're trying to think about what role you might play in a charity and the different challenges and rewards of it as well. Did anyone else want to comment on that before we go to the next one?
I think for me, it's the variety of the different things that we do. So we're not end furniture poverty within the group. We're not supposed to be frontline, but we do get lots of queries that we try to answer. But, you know, we're trying to get large organisations like big social landlords or local authorities to change the way they do things to help people at a time of crisis. And obviously we can't do that on our own. You know, these are massive entrenched problems. So it's forging partnerships with other charities. It's working with like-minded organisations to make things happen. I never turn down a meeting because I never know where it might lead to. And I love making new connections and joining the dots and being creative at coming at the problem from as many different angles as possible to try to make a difference. And, you know, when you hear a landlord has decided to, you know, pilot a furnished tenancy schemes for 250 properties, you know, that's hundreds of families. And this is a long-term thing because they will see it works and it's influencing the sector as a whole. And, you know, you're making a difference to people's lives. But I think that sheer variety and, you know, there are some fantastic people working in some fantastic charities. So making those links and working in partnership can be really rewarding as well.
And we're already getting close to the end of time. This is what happens, time slips away from us. But there was quite an interesting question in the chat about going for roles that you know you would be good at and maybe you've got a bit of experience in, or something you haven't done before but you think you might enjoy, which is quite a tricky question. And there probably isn't one answer, but I wondered if anyone had any thoughts on how you would view that in an application, for example.
Yeah, sorry, not a very helpful response really, but I would say both, because the way that I would approach interviews and applying for jobs is that even if you don't get the job at the end of the day, hopefully you get far enough to get some feedback on your application, and that will help to guide you in future. And, you know, if you get the job, great, it doesn't matter that you've not done it before, but clearly they think you can do it. So I definitely wouldn't let that put you off. And the other thing I think with applying for jobs is that quite often places say, oh, sorry, we can't give you feedback. And if you don't get as far as the interview stage, you can always ask. I've done that. I've, you know, not got that far and still followed up and gotten some advice from them, which has been really useful.
Our sort of attitude, I think, across the group is that, you know, it's about the person's mindset, and attitude is more important. You can teach people particular skills, you know, if they need to go on an Excel course or any kind of particular, you know, very specific skills that they need, you can teach them that. But having the right attitude and the right mindset and, you know, the right passion. So if you want to do something you enjoy, then chances are you're going to really want to do it. So you need to just make sure that you convey that and do as much as you can to prepare yourself in advance. But yeah, I think the attitude is so key.
I'll just add to that, Claire. I mean, Claire keeps using the word passion. and that's absolutely, you're not going to earn a fortune in the charitable sector, you know, and you'll earn, relatively speaking, you'll earn less than in the private sector. But I've been in jobs in the past where I haven't really got the passion for it, and you're soon found out. If anybody else is on the ball in your team, they'll soon find out you haven't really got the passion. And especially if you're coming into the charitable sector, if you're not passionate about that area of the sector, then you're probably not going to last very long.
Arguably as well, I think if you're thinking about applying for a role, firstly, we assess just based on potential and competencies, not on experience at all. And all our applications are anonymized anyway. So we pull anything to do with experience out of the application process. And all of our employers have signed up to that as an agreement. But if you're applying directly for a job, I know that whenever I've advertised a job or something in my team, yes, there is probably an element of like, it would be really handy if that person had some experience of, but actually, similar to Claire, I think it's a case of like lots of things can be taught. Approach and relationship building and stuff is something that you will have developed over time. But also I'd probably be questioning, like, I think if you're applying for a job, you want to be stretched, right? Most people when they're applying for a next step in their career, they want to be stretched. So actually what you want in a role is something where it will feel like a challenge and there'll be a new skill set for you to learn. So there's part of me that's always a little bit wary of employers that, you know, expect 5-6 years of project management experience for like a project officer role. And you're thinking, like, if I was, you know, 2 or 3 years out of university, I'd be thinking a project officer role would be great if I've kind of been involved in some projects, but never had the opportunity to like hold the reins of one, let alone had 5 or 6 years experience. So, my best advice, I think, is always like, don't devalue yourself either when you're applying for opportunities. And it's super important to recognize that they should feel like stretch opportunities in order to help aid you in your development.
I completely agree. I think just to echo what everyone's saying, apply for a job that really excites you. Because actually, when I've been interviewing and recruiting for our team, you are looking for potential. You're looking for people who you think they've got a really good attitude. They're passionate about not just working for a charity, but this charity specifically and this job, and they're going to roll up their sleeves and try really hard and muck in. And sometimes that might be over and above that someone else has all this sort of experience. And fundamentally, when we're sort of recruiting for the sort of graduate scheme here, everyone's got a degree because it's a graduate scheme and everyone's done society things. Like, everyone's kind of in, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but it's kind of in a similar position, to be honest. So what it boils down to when you're making those hard decisions is your sort of gut instinct on people's attitudes and their impression and the passion that they had. Those are the things that are going to stick in recruiters' minds when it comes down to it. And yeah, so I think apply for a job that you think you can do that for, where you think I am really passionate about that excites me, and that's when you're going to then excel throughout the application process as well.
The question that isn't in the Q&A at the moment but came in as a pre-question, there were two. One was about people getting into charities from a STEM background, so having studied something more science, technology, engineering and maths, rather than maybe the more obvious sort of social sciences. And another one about how important a master's degree is.
Can I just quickly say, as a STEM, someone with a STEM background, like having done, I actually did medicinal chemistry, and it was organic chemistry and drug design was my degree. And I thought, like, I really want to go into that. Like, I'm super excited about that. And then life circumstances were not working with me on that one, and it's probably my big piece of guidance and advice. It's like, your career pathway might take a different trajectory, and that's totally okay. I find that the skills that I developed in that qualification are super, super useful. And in my team, actually really like complementary, in that I feel like I've carved out a little bit of a niche for myself in a space that has been, you know, dominated by people from humanities background. That said, totally doesn't matter. We accept applications from people from all degree backgrounds and none. People with master's qualifications often have an extended skill set, really helpful, but I don't think it's the be all and end all for accessing the sector as a whole. That's probably my opinion as much as anything else.
I find that data is so key to change, and I think that there are some fantastic reports that are published on a weekly basis by some brilliant charities. One of the last, I have a policy and research officer working for me, and to be honest, I looked out for someone who had a social research master's, simply because I knew that they would have the right skills to do all of the work I needed doing with data and gathering data and analysing data, etc. So that was really key for me. But I think that, again, in our group of charities, we've got a furniture reuse charity, and I'm a trustee of the reuse network as well. And we have an engineer who works for us who has helped to build the world's first mattress cleaning machine. And I think that, developments and technology and innovation are going to be key to environmental charities, for example, in the coming years, and have been in recent years. So I think that there are certainly lots of opportunities for people from all backgrounds, but certainly from STEM backgrounds. We
are drawing to an end, and I promised I would keep that final piece of advice question for now. Another way of phrasing it that I always had on another panel is, what do you wish someone told you before you got into it? So slightly different perspective. I
think throughout the graduate scheme I did, it was only a year long. I think I was overthinking constantly. I still am an overthinker, but I was always sort of thinking about, well, what's this going to lead me? What path am I on now? What's my job? What will I be doing in 5 years, 10 years time? And I think that was part of the fact that you do GCSEs, you do your A-levels, you go to university. I was in that sort of mantra of thinking about the next step, and actually then you get a job and that's it. You've got your whole life ahead of you now to work, and it's not just one path anymore. So not to expect the unexpected, I'd say. I did a year's graduate scheme and was constantly worried about what the next step was, and then the job that I'm in now was created for me by our chief executive, who said, you seem to like writing and be good at it, but also you really like doing this cycling challenge. So let's put those together and make you head of grants and community fundraising. The two don't make sense together, but it made sense for me at the time, and it might not make sense to me in a year's time. And I might sort of move to a different area of fundraising and partnerships, or I might move out of fundraising and stay in the charity sector. There's lots of movements within your sort of career in the future. So I think make the right decision for you at this time, and you'll do the same throughout your entire life, and it's not one path that you're going to be on forever. And I need to keep telling this to myself as well. Vice for past Charlotte and current Charlotte.
There's so much of me just wants to go, Charlotte, you just stole my answer, because I would say the exact same thing. But maybe
me, Craig.
No pressure, right? But maybe say it in a slightly different way. There's a couple of things I think. One, I wish I could go back to my 16-year-old self, actually, right? When I was asked, what A-levels do I want to do? Or what do I want to do at university? And I turned around and said, I don't know, be a doctor. And they said, do sciences then. And then I started studying sciences and then went down that path. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And half the time now, I still don't know, genuinely don't know. And that's okay. And actually, I think that's what I tell myself is let your career path develop. Some people know, right? Some people just know what they want to be involved in. And lots of people don't, but they know that they want I know that I want my work to feel meaningful. And I hope that it creates some of the change that I would like to see in the world, and that actually, I'm not just going about my day job, living my life for the sake of the salary or for prestige of job title or whatever. And I think that's my driving factor, and that's okay. And actually, our chief exec said to me the other day, the more I think about it, she says your job, you wouldn't see your job spec written down at any other organization. You're part business development, part data systems and governance. And she's like, we pretty much created that for you as you went. But I see that as a massive compliment. You just find out what your skills are and what you're good at and make the most of it. So yeah, that's pretty much what Charlotte said. Katie.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, I think it's not so much something I wish someone had said, but a really useful point somebody made when I was still at university actually was think about there are different areas of the charity sector. So we all represent different areas of that sector, but you might have things like international development, environment, anti-poverty. And then within all of those organisations, they're all probably going to have marketing and comms people, fundraising people, finance, monitoring and evaluation. And those things can all cross over. So it's kind of like picking maybe the thing that interests you or the function that interests you and getting a really good understanding of what that involves, because that will probably help you, you know, to kind of pick a bit of a career path. And I think for me, what made me choose monitoring and evaluation was because it can be transferred to lots of different sectors. So yeah, obviously I would have to learn, you know, if I moved to a different sector, I would have to learn that like sector specific knowledge. I'd have to learn you know, the key concepts, debates, the terminology, that kind of thing. But my basic skill set would be the same, and it can take you, you know, into lots of different areas perhaps as your interests change throughout your career. Well, was it Claire after me, I think? Yeah.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone said some fantastic things. I'm not sure what I have to add other than to be open to opportunities. And every day's a school day. You know, we've all got things to learn. None of us know everything. We continue to learn and learn from others around us. So be open, you know, be open to other people's wisdom and experience and skills, and have confidence in your own. I think that's something that I've lacked in is you know, not having the confidence to actually, I do know what I'm doing, and I do a flipping good job, and I should be proud of that, and having that self-belief. But yeah, just keep an open mind. And I think that I totally agree with Charlotte. I never imagined I'd end up doing what I do now. You know, I always wanted to be a journalist, and I was a journalist for a number of years. But yeah, I allowed myself to look for an opportunity and to take it.
Thanks, Claire. I should speak from the point of view of a non-graduate. I never went to university, and I'm at the other end of my career. I've got 10 years to go before I retire. What I would remind people on the call is you're going to one of the most prestigious universities in the world. So the quality of your education is a given. But in terms of how you can help my sector, how you can help the homelessness sector, let's take, for example, if you're studying law and you're going to practice law, perhaps you might choose the career path of looking at, you know, legal advice, homelessness law or housing law. If you're studying medicine, perhaps you might want to take a career path towards drug and alcohol and addiction services, so that, you know, in perhaps a few years' time, when you've got that experience within your specific degree, you can then think, well, okay, I've specialised in housing law. I'm now going to support and help people who don't have a house. Or I've specialised in medicine in addiction services, and there are lots of opportunities to do that. So spend the first few years after you've graduated getting that embedded experience within your own area, and then start looking at how you can help homeless people. There are so many opportunities, and there are so many, you know, if we had more lawyers that were clued up and that we could call on very, very quickly, who knew housing law, who knew homelessness law, it would save a lot of heartache for the people that we work with. So spend a few years building up that experience, and then look at how you can help a specific sector, whatever that is that interests you.